Hi guys, it's me, Ginger, and I have tons of talented friends who are sharing all their creativity with the world during this period of social isolation, and I thought I would ruin that for everyone by sharing something of my own, making the whole movement jump the shark, so to speak. So I am going to read you a chapter of my book, You Only Live Once. And if you press the down button enough times, I promise not to do this again, or if you do it up enough times, maybe I will. Right, you only live once. All names, locations, shoe sizes, and internet browsing histories contained in the story are fictional. If there is any resemblance to actual people, situations, or places, then they're entirely and deliberately coincidental. This book is written from the first-person perspective, and therefore all opinions expressed in this story are those of the characters from whose perspective you are now reading, and do not reflect my own, except the opinion on Tanqueray gin. That I stand by. The opinions, actions, and intentions of characters in this book are not intended to be a reflection of the opinions, actions, or intentions held by any real people these characters might resemble. I don't guarantee the accuracy of any facts or figures quoted in the story, so I encourage you to Google them. It's often scarier. Finally, this is a story. It's only intended to be a story. I hope you enjoy it, or enjoy being disagreeable about it. There we go. Chapter 1. Drea. My name is Andrea Franca, and I humiliate men for a living. I mean, that's not what my job title is. My job title is officially Senior Unarmed Combat Instructor, Secret Intelligence Service. And it's pretty much the same thing. Every 6 weeks I stand in the same drafty ground floor gym in Whitehall, and I'm presented with 6 brand new chauvinistic dolts to deal with, and I begin by breaking them. This morning was no exception. "Good morning, lads," I announced as the latest round of new recruits shuffled onto the mats from the locker room. "We're going to begin today by assessing your current hand-to-hand combat effectiveness, so I'll know exactly where each of you needs improvement." What made the first day of each new class so enjoyable was the predictability of it all. The moment I uttered those words, the 6 new recruits looked at me with barely concealed snorts of derision. I know what they were thinking. I mean, just look at this lot. Out of the 6 recruits, the 2 largest ones were shaven-headed meatheads from the Royal Marines. We had, as usual, 3 recruits from the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment 2, Britain's famous SAS, and the final 2 had been selected from D Company Special Forces Support Group. They were all big, swaggering, full of themselves combat veterans, and each and every one of them was staring at me, wondering, what can a 10-stone girl possibly teach me about unarmed combat? And that's precisely why I was there. I tried not to let the smile on my lips be too obvious as I pulled myself up to my full 5'4" in front of this semicircle of Special Forces operatives. I was dwarfed by each and every one of them by at least 6 or 7 inches, and up to 100 pounds of muscle. But it didn't matter, not one bloody bit. We were all barefoot, in lightweight competition gears, and that made us even in my books. I nodded at the first recruit, one of those Royal Marines, and ordered, "Get the door for me, would you, mate?" He bristled when I said that. Nobody likes a girl to call them mate. But the big fellow proved he could at least follow basic instructions, and he lumbered over to the old wooden door and slammed it shut, sealing the 7 of us into the old drafty room. On our first day, I slipped my hands behind my back, pacing back and forth in front of the recruits. I like to make things a little more interesting. So here's the deal. I paused for effect. We're going to roll on the mats, each of you in turn, and if any of you can make me snap out or tap out in 60 seconds or less, I'll fuck you. I heard 6 audible gasps, as I always did. As I said, what makes the first day of each new class so enjoyable is the predictability of it all. The moment those words came out of my mouth, the lumbering recruits started paying attention to me. Exactly the wrong sort of attention, which is exactly why I'd said it. "Let's start with you." I pointed to the big fellow who'd slammed the door. "Get on the mats with me." I then pointed at the SAS recruit standing at the end of the line. "All right, Hanson, mind timing us?" "Yes, ma'am." He grinned at the compliment, predictably, of course, and lifted his eyes to the clock on the wall. At the same time, the Royal Marine shot me a wolfish grin and lumbered onto the vinyl mats in the centre of the room. He looked like a big white gorilla, only without the table manners, and as he squared off in front of me, the Marine bent his knees to give himself a lower centre of gravity and stretched those big fingers of his out into claws. I grinned and nodded at the bloke timing us. Begin. 60 seconds, starting now. The Royal Marine lurched towards me. Predictable. That's what I'd said. The first day of class was always predictable. As the first recruit to each of my 6-week training classes always did, this Royal Marine stretched out to grab me on the mats, not thinking for a second that there was anything a 29-year-old girl with a funny accent could teach him about hand-to-hand combat. Thwack! And that's when I broke his nose. My right hand shot out in a fiercely controlled jab, and suddenly that Royal Marine was standing there with blood gushing from his nose. He looked shocked, and I can't blame him. That hadn't been part of the plan. His plan. But in the immortal words of Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. The Royal Marine hesitated only for a second, but a second was all I needed. I swept forward and grabbed the starchy collar of his gi, having to stretch my hands up high to even reach the towering soldier's neck. Then, arms crisscrossed, I dug my thumbs in and tightened that collar around his throat in a classic cross-collar choke. The big man's face instantly turned red. The cross-collar choke is one of the earliest and simplest chokes you'll ever learn in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's also one of the most effective, as long as your opponent isn't expecting it. And when you've just been punched in the face, in the middle of what was supposed to be a non-striking roll on the mats, you stop knowing what to expect. That's exactly why I'd chosen to do it. Now in a cross-collar choke, you literally strangle your opponent with the collar of their own gi, and it's a technique that works equally well in a suit jacket, raincoat, or even a button-down shirt. Within seconds, the towering Royal Marine was wobbling on his feet as I cut off the blood supply to his head. A moment after that, his big palm slapped loudly against his chest as he tapped out. I released the chokehold, and the big man staggered back, whooping for air and staunching the blood pouring from his nose. 15 seconds, the helpful chap who'd been timing me announced. Okay, good. I wiped the spots of blood from my hands. This is why we trained in black gis. You could never get the blood out of the white ones. Who's next? The atmosphere in that little gym instantly changed. 20 seconds earlier, these 6 recruits were staring at me with contempt. This compact, wiry little girl with mousy brown hair and an upturned nose. What could I teach them about hand-to-hand combat? But now, the biggest of the 6 was in the corner of the room, wedging tissues into his gushing nostrils. It always went this way, as I'd said. Predictable. Okay, you next. Since there'd been no volunteers, I selected the second in the lineup, another equally intimidating Royal Marine. This one didn't smile quite so confidently as he stepped onto the mats. He kept his eyes fixated a lot more tightly on me as he lumbered forward. Good. That had been lesson 1. Never underestimate your opponent. These 6 recruits, as were each and every one of the recruits who rotated through my 6-week intensive course, needed to be educated in that. They were all frontline combat veterans. They were used to their opponents being big fellows just like them, clutching an AK-47 or a combat knife. They existed in a world in which you knew your enemy. You knew what they looked like, and you knew how to take them out. But they just joined the Secret Intelligence Service, where such things were never quite so obvious. For example, when these 6 had entered this drafty gym this morning, they probably looked at me thinking I was just a girl. They'd assumed their years of training and experience, combined with their greater height and physical strength, would ensure I wasn't anything other than a pleasant distraction to them. But what they didn't know was that I was a former Commonwealth Games gold medalist in wrestling, a former Olympic hopeful in judo, a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'd spent 2 summers training in Krav Maga with the IDF in Tel Aviv. None of that individually made me as equal or dangerous as a trained, experienced Special Forces operative, but not until I added a distraction, such as a line like, "If any of you can make me tap out or snap out in 60 seconds or less, I'll fuck you." The moment I said that, the 6 recruits stopped thinking with their brains and started thinking with their cocks, and that's exactly when I had them. All of them, each and every time. As I'd said, the first day of class was always predictable, and so were the recruits I trained during it. Three hours later, we had another broken nose, a dislocated thumb, and a possible concussion, but nobody had made me tap out or snap out. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and addressed the red-faced, frustrated recruits as they sat on the mats. "Good first day," I beamed. "Check for the infirmary, and I'll see you all tomorrow." The 6 recruits clambered from the mats and started lumbering back towards the locker room, muttering under their breath. They'd learned an important lesson this morning. Don't underestimate somebody just because they're smaller and slimmer than you. Any of these 6 veterans might have been able to pick me up and snap me with their bare hands, but they'd never get the chance, because I was already 3 steps ahead of each of them. As they marched towards the doorway, I caught up with the last recruit. a handsome, dark-eyed soldier from B Company. I reached out and touched his elbow, grinning as the huge bloke wheeled around and loomed over me. "You didn't make me tap out or snap out," I winked at him, giving him a smile. "But you did pretty well." I handed him my card. "Now, I'm not going to fuck you, but I'll let you buy me a drink." The big soldier's eyes flashed. His mouth twisted from a thin, humiliated line into a sly smile. When he followed the 5 other recruits into the locker room, he had a little extra swagger to his stride. I smiled as I watched him go. As I'd said, predictable. Bill Villiers, my department head, was waiting in the hallway as I emerged from the locker room 30 minutes later. My hair was still wet from my shower, and my muscles ached from the 3 hours on the mats. I was looking forward to a good lunch and a sit-down, not the disapproving glare of my boss. Sergeant Dicker's going to be out for 2 weeks with that nose. Villiers hefted himself up from the wall he'd been leaning against, and checked his clipboard. Lance Corporal Allen's getting his thumb checked now. He shook his head disapprovingly. "You've only incapacitated half your class for once. Was it an off morning for you, Franco?" I snorted, heading down the hallway towards the cafeteria. "They seem to be quicker learners than the usual recruits. I felt like it got easier on them." Villiers was matching my pace, his skeeves and hawk's brogues clip-clopping on the concrete as we walked. "Well, you needn't have bothered. They'll have plenty of recovery time now. You're on assignment. Classes are suspended." I stopped abruptly, whipping around to face my boss. Villiers' pinched face turned to face mine. "You're serious?" My heart raced. I'd been with the Special Intelligence Service for 3 years now, and I'd been hustling them for an assignment throughout. Was it finally happening? Villiers nodded. "There's a shit show going down. All hands on deck." He tore the top sheet of his clipboard and handed it to me. "Mother wants to see you at 1400 sharp." I grabbed the printout. Official orders from Military Intelligence, Division 6. I felt butterflies in my stomach. Finally. "And grab some lunch, finish up the paperwork, and don't be late." As abrupt as always, Bill Villiers wheeled around, clip-clopping down the hallway at his typical brisk pace. I watched him go, hands shaking. I was finally getting a chance to prove myself. At 2:45 p.m. precisely, I emerged from Vauxhall Station and crossed the busy road to the towering entrance to the SIS headquarters, the gaudy 1980s building nicknamed Legoland by many Londoners. The building was the headquarters of the Secret Intelligence Service, Military Intelligence, Division 6, and on the top floor were the offices of Ellen Albert, the former intelligence officer who now oversaw operations for the branch. She was less than affectionately known as Mother within the organisation, and until today, I'd only met her once before. There was a standard rigmarole to get in through the building, swiping my card, going through security, and then taking the lift to the top floor. At each stop, huge glass windows looked out across the fast-flowing Thames and the buildings of Millbank on the other side. I felt butterflies in my stomach as I ascended to the top floor of Babylon-on-Thames. The lift dinged and deposited me into the hallway. I found the door to Mother's offices already open, and Bill Villiers was there, ushering me quickly into the room. "This'll only be a quick one, Franca," he murmured to me, rushing me past the desk of Mother's secretary towards the double doors leading to her office. "She's got lots of people to see today, so keep your mouth shut and behave." Keep your mouth shut and behave. The rules I've been expected to follow my entire life, and routinely fail to. The door to Mother's office swung open, and Bill led me inside. I had to stifle a gasp as I entered the enormous office, which was lined on one side by huge glass windows that looked out across the entire vista of London's North Bank. Behind the enormous desk, flanked by officious-looking men in expensive suits, sat Ellen Albert. She was a broad woman, with bright red curls that had clearly come out of a bottle, and a serious face with sharp grey eyes. I didn't say anything as I approached her desk. I didn't know what to say. Back when I joined the Special Intelligence Service, straight from the Foreign Office, I'd been excited at the thought of working for the woman who was known to them as the mother of the British intelligence community. I'd seen pictures of her, and imagined she'd be some sassy, vibrant woman who'd welcome bright young female talent to the division, anxious to blow away the cobwebs of the stuffy old boy reputation popularised by the James Bond and John Milton novels. Instead, I found her to be every bit as stuffy and officious as the grey-haired men in suits had been. A number cruncher and pencil pusher who'd had me pegged as an inconvenient, uncompliant pain in the arse, just like my male colleagues on King Charles Street had. That's why I'd worked for Division 6 for 3 years, and the only talents I'd ever been able to demonstrate were the ones that had nothing to do with my PPE degree from St David's College, or the years of experience that I'd earned working for the Foreign Office. Instead of being on assignment, using my fluent French and German in the field, in addition to my eidetic memory skills and marksmanship, I've been stuck training new recruits in hand-to-hand combat. Basically, teaching them that it's okay to hit a woman. But as I stood in front of Mother's desk that afternoon, I had the thrilling feeling that all that was about to change. Bill ushered me closer to the desk. Mother looked up from the sheaf of papers she'd been flicking through, peering at me over the top of her half-moon glasses. "Who's this one again?" My face was a mask, but a question hit me like a punch to the guts. She didn't even know my name. "Adrian Franke," Bill Villiers murmured quietly. "Training department?" "Oh, yes." Mother nodded, though it was very clear my name and department offered no additional information to her. She rifled through the papers on her desk before finding one that had a black and white photo of me clipped to it. Her keen eyes scanned the document for a moment before she looked up again. "You've been with us 3 years, is that correct, Franke?" "Yes, ma'am." I tried not to let my voice crack. "First time on assignment?" "Yes, ma'am," I nodded, before adding, "Grateful for the opportunity, ma'am." Mother ignored that comment entirely. She scanned the document, reaching for a rubber stamp with her right hand, and hammered big red letters across the top of it. Letters which read, "Approved." Then she offered the papers to me without even making eye contact. "Report to Century House at 1800 for briefing," Mother snapped, holding the paper out impatiently. I glanced at Bill, and he nodded hurriedly, ordering me to snatch the paper out of Mother's hand before she... Too late. Mother rustled the paper, rolling her eyes. I gulped, taking the document and retreating 2 steps from her desk. Mother's eyes returned to the papers spread out in front of her, and I glanced towards Bill again, wondering if this was my cue to leave. Instead, there was a sharp rap on the corner of the doorframe. Yet another grey-haired man in a suit, Mother's chief of staff, I believe, peered around his head around the corner. "Who's here, ma'am?" That was when Ellen Albert looked up again, her eyes narrowing behind the frame of her glasses. "Tell him to wait a moment." "Yes, ma'am." As the chief of staff ducked back around the corner, Mother turned to me and I finally met her steely gaze. "That's your partner for the assignment," she said dryly. "He's late, of course." Partner? I felt the butterflies in my stomach intensify. This was the real deal. An assignment, a briefing, a partner. I wondered who it would be. Some veteran agent? One of those handsome bastards in a Savile Row suit? A man with a good breeding and fine manners that the James Bond movies had educated us all to expect from intelligence agents? "We're short-staffed, Franke," Mother snapped sternly. "Truth be told, that's the only reason we're sending you on assignment. We need every field agent with language skills we can get our hands on, including you." Again, her derision felt like a slap in the face. But I didn't let her see it. "Pairing you up with a new recruit, former MI5, Mother's tone was flat. "Believe it or not, he's even rougher around the edges than you are. I need you to keep him on the straight and narrow. Understood?" All my enthusiasm from earlier evaporated. Yes, I was finally getting given an assignment, but only reluctantly, apparently. More than that, Mother's opinion of my partner for this assignment was apparently even lower than her opinion of me. "Good news, though," Ellen Albert snorted dryly. "You know him. That's why we paired you two together." She shuffled her papers busily. "Hopefully you can keep a handle on him. Lord knows everyone else has failed." I was barely listening to that last bit. The words she'd spoken before had been the ones to grab me. I knew him? 7 years earlier, I'd graduated with a PPE from St David's College, Oxford, so I knew plenty of classmates who'd gone into positions with the Home Office, Foreign Office, or Her Majesty's Treasury. But as far as I was aware, I knew nobody else from the intelligence community, whether the Domestic Security Service, MI5, or the Foreign Security Service I worked for, MI6. Not that we exactly advertised our employment with either. As my mind raced, Mother glanced once more at me and warned, "Keep him out of trouble, okay? This is one of the biggest situations we've had in years, so I don't want him screwing it up." She pulled her half-moon glasses off and rubbed the bridge of her nose wearily. "Your assignment is simple, straightforward, but important." Her eyes lifted, drilling into mine. "Do a good job, and there may be more of them." She ended that sentence there, but I knew I'd only heard half of it. The rest, which was equally important, had been left unspoken. "Do a bad job, or screw up, and you'll never get another assignment again." "Yes, ma'am," I nodded. My mouth was dry, and I had to clutch the paper she'd handed to me with white knuckles to stop my hands from shaking. When I'd woken up this morning in my little flat in Chiswick, I had never expected the day to go like this. For 3 years, I'd prayed each and every day for the chance to go on assignment, to be out in the field, doing the vital intelligence-gathering work I was trained for and passionate about. Now I was being offered that very opportunity, but in a manner I'd never have expected. Instead of feeling jubilant, like this was an achievement to be excited about, I left feeling like the last kid to be picked for a five-a-side football game in the playground. like I'd only been chosen for this assignment because there was literally nobody else. But I couldn't dwell on that. I couldn't focus on the negative. Mother had said very clearly that if I performed well, there'd be more assignments, better assignments, the chance to prove myself. Even if Mother's tone was dismissive, I couldn't ignore the opportunity I was being presented with. This was what I'd wanted for so long. So I wouldn't just do a good job, I'd do a phenomenal one. Whatever form this assignment took, whatever the circumstances threw at me, I would handle it. There was nothing that could derail me. So I thought. Because then, Mother looked up towards the doorway and barked, "Send him in." The door to her office swung open and a towering figure stood framed in the doorway. My breath hitched. I'd claimed nothing could derail me. Well, I was wrong. I wasn't just derailed. I was suddenly completely off the tracks, hurtling into nothingness, disappearing into oblivion like that train at the end of the bridge on the River Kwai. Mother hadn't been lying. I did know the man standing in the doorway, my partner for this assignment. I knew him painfully well, agonizingly so. The towering figure in the frayed Tom Ford pinstripes, standing 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders so wide they nearly filled the entire doorway, was my old university boyfriend, Rory Kincaid. I reached out and grabbed the back of one of the leather chairs in front of Mother's desk, because otherwise I'd have fallen right to the floor. Rory Kincaid, my first love, my first kiss, the boy who'd taken my virginity, and then disappeared without a trace during our second year at St. David's, after all that business with his father came to light. Except he wasn't a boy any longer. I hadn't seen or heard from Rory Kincaid in nearly a decade, and the bright-eyed, smiling man I'd fallen in love with was apparently as dead as his father. Rory Kincaid, standing in the doorway now, was a shaven-headed, stony-faced beast of a man, with a muscular body twice the size I remember it, and the eyes of a man who hasn't seen or tasted joy in a long time. Perhaps as long as the last time since we'd kissed. "Edward Franca," Mother said dryly from behind me. "You remember Sergeant Kincaid, I assume? You two went to university together, I believe?" I gulped. My mouth was so dry I couldn't even speak. Instead, I just nodded. "And good. He's your partner for this assignment." I turned around, hiding my hands behind my back so Mother couldn't see them shaking. She was still looking at me, but with disinterest, as if she was keen to get me out of her office already. "And do you accept the assignment?" I gulped again, or tried to, as much as my dry mouth would let me. Did I accept this assignment? I didn't even know what it was, where it was. All I knew was that I was very far from the first choice for it, and that I'd been paired on this assignment with the man who'd broken my heart as a foolish 19-year-old at university. Every instinct inside me told me to say no, to toss this stupid document stamped with the letters "approved" into Mother's face and stomp out of her big gaudy office. But I'd waited my entire adult life for this opportunity. This was the culmination of all the ambitions I'd had growing up, watching those cheesy old James Bond films with my father when I visited him in Stuttgart. I remembered something else he'd used to say to me, his curt German accent. "Sie wurstig mit deinen Wünschen. Sie konnten noch in Erfüllen gehen." Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. I just had. I'd wanted to be an intelligence agent my entire life, and now I was being given that opportunity. As derailed as I felt, as dry as my mouth was, and no matter how much my hand shook, I sure as hell wasn't going to let an uptight old lady or a gloomy ex-boyfriend ruin this for me. I nodded at Mother, and somehow found the words to murmur, "I accept it." "Good." Mother's eyes returned to the papers on her desk. She was done with me. For a moment I just stood there, uncertain of what to do. It wasn't until Bill Villiers stepped up and jerked his head towards the door that I understood what was expected. Get the fuck out of Mother's office. I nodded once again, and then let my feet carry me towards the doorway, one after the other, step by step, closer towards the looming silhouette that belonged to my long-ago ex-boyfriend. "Century House," Mother called after me as I left. 1800 hours. Don't be late." And then I was in the doorway, standing in front of Rory Kincaid. Rory Bear, I used to call him. That seemed like a lifetime ago now. I looked up at him, struck once more by just how tall he was. The height was the same. Everything else was different. This wasn't Rory Bear anymore. In fact, the broad-shouldered, immensely muscular, cold-eyed man staring down at me might as well have been a stranger. I barely recognized him. It was impossible to believe that I'd once been in love with him. "She'll wait for you outside." Bill Villiers was talking to Kincaid, or more accurately talking at him, since the towering man didn't respond. "Mother wants a word first." Rory still didn't respond, so Bill just shot him a nod. Then the department head curled his fingers around my elbow, something I normally detested. I let him to do it today, though. I let him lead me out of Mother's office and into the hallway beyond because I didn't know what else to do. My head was a mess. My mind was swirling like an ocean. Butterflies churned in my stomach and my palms were sweaty. It's not every day you get the opportunity of your dreams handed to you on a plate. Well, and it's also not every day that your long-lost ex-boyfriend is served up to you on that exact same plate, like Brussels sprouts ruining an otherwise perfect Christmas dinner. I stumbled into the hallway and heard the door to Mother's office crash shut behind me. Rory was in there with her now, and for the life of me, I had no idea what she might be saying to him. I was more worried about what would happen afterwards, though, when Rory Kincaid emerged again. Because forget what Mother might be saying to him, I had to figure out what I'd say to him. To the man who'd broken my heart and abandoned me 10 years earlier. Right, that was chapter 1. So as I said, leave it down vote, and I promise never to do this again. Leave it up vote, and maybe I'll read chapter 2. Thanks very much. Stay safe, stay at home, stay in social isolation. I will see you later.